What's happening tonight? Tonight we're going to be painting a butterfly, so if you're joining me, let me know you're in chat with me and say hello. If you see that there are any issues with our stream, please let me know in the comments or the chat below. The software here has been a little bit sketchy this afternoon, and so hopefully we can get through this class and it'll be nice and breezy. So tonight we're going to be drawing together. I think tonight's class will probably take maybe an hour. Since we're going to do this butterfly, it's pretty simple, and I'm going to break down the shape for you and how we can draw this out pretty easily. And I'm going to be using some different paints tonight, so if you don't have the exact colors, please don't panic. Use what you've got and we'll have fun anyway. What else did I want to touch on with you tonight? If you're new here, my name is Paige and I'm the Chief Pixel Pusher and Paintbrusher over at Gumption, and I love to paint and do all the art stuff, and I love to share it with you too. You'll have to disregard my hands tonight because I have been painting this week and they're covered in paint. So let's talk about what we are using tonight. Some of our supplies that I'm using tonight are Beam Handmade paints, and I'm not affiliated with Beam and they aren't paying me to do this. This was an exercise for me to test out their paints and try something different. I'm also going to be using a few metallic paints tonight. If you have metallic paints, throw them in the mix tonight. If you don't panic. You can just kind of see what it looks like when you're using metallic paints. If you have colored pencils that might have gold color, then you could use those too. So, yeah, and I'm going to be using Fabriano paper tonight. This is usually the paper that I use when I'm doing work for clients, so you'll get to see that too. So without further ado, I think we can get right into the drawing. And tonight we are going to be drawing. There is no download for tonight. Just draw along with me and do the best that you can. I think it's going to be fun. All right, let's get to it. Whoop, wrong camera. So we don't have our palette cam tonight. I'm sorry. It's my project that I'm working on, and we'll have it back here hopefully in a couple weeks. So this is what we're going to be painting, something similar to this tonight. And as you can see, I have this Fabriano paper. This is hot pressed paper and not cold pressed, and just what that means is it's pretty smooth. And you can see this is a nice, easy, manageable size. This is a 5x7 size, so if you wanted to get something like this for a block like this, you can send them as cards, your little paintings as cards. So that's pretty cool. So first we're gonna start our drawing here a little bit, and I just have a kneaded eraser and I'm using a 2B pencil, and we're just gonna sketch lightly and kind of how I am doing my butterfly is I kind of do a rectangular shape, and so I kind of do this square rectangular thing, and this guy's got kind of these slanty bottom parts, so kind of do this a little bit. And what's great about these kneaded erasers is they really can take off lead here without ruining your paper, so that's kind of nice. So, and then I kind of split my butterfly in half this way, and that's kind of in half, isn't it? Yeah, and in half this way, so you can be somewhat symmetrical. And then kind of put his little body in here. And then have his wings kind of come up here. And do the same thing on the other side. So we have our center line here. I kind of, in this guy, he's kind of curves a little bit here. So I'm going to curve these lines here. And he's got a little bit of scalloping along the edge, so I'm going to kind of scallop along the edge and come in. And do the same thing over on the other side. I couldn't tell you what kind of butterfly this is, but I was looking at blue animals online and this guy popped up and I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. So then I'm gonna do these little curved bits down here. Hopefully you can see that okay. He's got some more scalloping down here. And the bottom part doesn't stick out as far, so I'm going to bring that in a little. But when you're drawing things, it makes it easier if you break it down by the overall shape of the item. Drawing can be intimidating for folks, and when you just look at the overall shape and then break it down into smaller shapes, it will make that much easier for you and more enjoyable. And oftentimes, if you find that you're drawing off the page, a lot of times it's because you've started with one little bit of that drawing, and if you look at the overall piece, it makes it a little bit better. So I need to scooch this guy in a little bit. So if you're just joining, go ahead and pop in the chat and let me know that you are here with me tonight. Okay, so that looks good enough for me, for my little butterfly. We can't forget his little antenna here. Okay. I could probably make his wings a little bit bigger up here. Maybe I will. Just real quick, bring this one up a little bit more. So now I can erase all the parts out that I don't need, all my direction lines here. And if you got a spot that you think's a little too dark, you can take your eraser and tap it. If you don't have a kneaded eraser, no worry. Sometimes pencil lines have their own appeal when you're painting and can add a little bit of character. So that's okay. Use what you've got. Okay. So we've got our drawing. I'm going to show you the colors that I'm actually using tonight because I think I breezed right through that. I'm using some Mayan yellow, Mayan red, and Mayan green and indigo tonight, and I'll be using gold and indigold too. But I wanted to swatch these for you. Oops. So you could see these colors, because I'm going to make a brown out of these colors. So I'll tell you a little bit about Beam Paints. I just discovered them recently, and it's actually run and operated by an Indigenous woman who makes all these paints in Canada, and her family were artists, and this is a tradition I believe their family has had. And so she makes these handmade watercolors, and she is plastic free. So you can see this little palette is actually a little piece of wood that she's drilled some holes in and made a cool little palette out of. And I just am a big fan of her company. I love that she is plastic free, and she uses her own honey and tree sap from where she lives, and I just think that's really cool. So these are all the colors in this little palette, and by mixing these colors here, I can create a brown. So you'll see me do that tonight, and I just wanted to give you an idea of what those colors looked like. I'm also going to be using gold, which I'm going to zoom in here a little bit and see if you can see that gold. It's pretty cool. Maybe you can see that, huh? And also, I'll be using this Indigold. I'm going to be mixing a blue probably with this Indigo Gold. And it has a little bit of these gold flecks in here. That's what makes it so fun. And you may not be able to see that just yet, but you might as we can go along here. Okay, so those are the colors that I'm going to use. If you, you can use a phthalo blue or any kind of turquoise green that you want. I kind of mixed some of these colors together to create this blue here in this image. I'll be using the gold around this area, which you can use a sienna, a raw umber, or maybe even a sienna color. That's kind of a tan color if you don't have a metallic paint. And then I'll be mixing this brown color here. So without further ado, let's get started. And I'm going to turn this camera off, I think, so you can see my palette and everything too. Now, if you have any questions that crop up for you, feel free to pop them in chat. Okay, so first I'm going to mix my blue color, and I've got a couple of water receptacles here. Sorry for all the noise, it's just so noisy. So I'm going to put a little bit of water in these troughs and add more if I need more. And I'm going to take this turquoise color, or this is the Mayan Green, and put a little paint here in this trough. And the indigo color, or the Mayan indigo, it's the same color. It just doesn't, this one has gold flecks in it. Maybe you can see that. I don't know. So I'm just mixing kind of this blue color. And I think I'm going to leave it a little bit lighter maybe tonight. Then I'm also going to mix some brown. So I cleaned off my brush. I'm going to add some yellow in here, this Mayan yellow. Then I'm going to take some red. So if you just have a yellow of some sort, like a lemon yellow, and maybe an alizarin crimson red. Let's see what this does here. By adding this Mayan green color, you could use your indigo or a blue color as well. You can see this kind of turns this into a brown. And you can do it to your liking. I think that's going to work for me. So we'll get started. Now this is a pretty simple illustration, but we may have to do it in parts here. So I think this gives us a little shade, so I'm going to move this here. So I'm just going to do a wash of this blue color. Over the top wings. Moving this bead over. And letting this dry. We'll also do a portion of the lower wings here. So you can see I'm kind of drawing this over with the same color. It's not exactly a square, but kind of curved along the body here. And that might take just a minute to dry, so while you're painting along with me, we'll kind of let that dry a bit. And actually, while that's waiting to dry just a little bit, I'm going to mix some gold here in my pan too. This is where you could use a raw umber or a brown of your liking, maybe a lighter brown than the one that we mixed here. Kind of wait for that to dry. Now I'm going to show you in the camera here. Let's see. That might pick up that gold color. It's so cool. So I mentioned that I use hot pressed paper, and it's not, it's smooth, and I like it because I feel like sometimes I can manipulate the paint a little bit differently than you do in cold pressed paper, which has ridges and texture. And it's just a preference thing, I think, but when you start learning, oftentimes you're using cold pressed paper. And this is probably my favorite paper that's available now. And I do love these little blocks because they really are not intimidating. You can just do a quick little painting and feel like you've accomplished something. And you're not committed to a huge painting. Okay, so it looks like mine is dry enough. So I'm going to go in with my gold color and I'm going to paint along here, the bottom part, and just move that pigment into the lower parts of the wings. I'm actually very excited about this paint because I've started making my own paint out of interest in this handmade paint and being sustainable. And I just think it's really interesting, which I never thought I would be interested in paint making, but that's pretty cool. So I have experimented and done some of my own paint making too, which I'm actually using some of those paints here, and I like them all right. They turned out okay. I didn't have any big issues with it. So I will have a couple videos. I am going to do an unboxing video for these beam paints and talk about them a little bit more, and also a video on the paint making process for any of you who might be interested out there. Okay, so now that I have my gold here, I can, it's still wet, but I can go into my brown, and this is looking, I might need to add just a little bit more red here to make it look a little less greenish. It started looking a little green. So now I can paint in the body here. And if it mixes with the gold, it's not a big deal. And I'll run it up kind of along this lower area too. It'll blend with the gold. Kind of scallop that edge just a little bit. And there are certain points on these scallops where they're a little bit darker. So I can kind of put in a little pigment on the edge. Of course, we're going to do a few layers of paint just to make it darker. And so it's looking pretty light right now, but that's okay. So I think we can go in to the top wings here and do a little more work there. And I don't know if it helps you to have this other example here kind of hanging out too. So I'm going to make this portion here a little bit darker. I'm just adding the pigment that we've already mixed up and layering this over the top. So just for this top area. And I'm going to kind of scallop this edge a little bit and just kind of do an S shape down. And I'll do the same thing for the other side. Try to keep them even. Fill in any holes. Okay. So I'm going to do a similar thing down the side here. Just kind of a zigzaggy, scallopy sort of thing on each side. And you can tap in a little more paint if you want to. And then I think I'm going to go along the edge here and do a similar thing down the side. Just to darken up along that edge. Okay, how you doing out there? So we've got a little bit of paint to dry. I might kind of draw this along the top of the wing here. So I've got quite a bit that needs to dry here. Might have to break out the old hair dryer. We'll wait a minute or two there. In the meantime, I think I can go into the body with this kind of small brush. I'm going to mix up a little more pigment here for my brown to get a little darker brown color. And sometimes this Mayan green, it mixes really nicely with this Mayan red and creates kind of a dark browny, kind of purpley, or it can be gray color. So you can see this has less water in it, more pigment. And I can kind of define my little, the body here. And since I've got this great dark brown color, I can kind of go along the outside here and define these wings a little bit on the lower part of the body. that's really pretty brown. And I'm going to go along the edge here of these wings too, even though there's still a little wet gold color, but I can move this brown in there a little bit. Give a little more definition. And actually I'm going to add a little bit more here at the top of the lower wings. One thing about this paint, and probably often handmade paint, if honey is used as a binder or a part of the binder, it smells so good. Okay. So on the bottom part of this, of these wings, we have these little nubs that we put darker pigment in earlier, and they're still a little bit darker, so we can add a little more dark brown to them if your area is dry and you're able to paint in there. And one other thing I need to do before I forget is that this butterfly has these little circles down here. So we'll want to make sure we reserve those. So I'm going to just paint a circle in here. Just draw it in with your paintbrush. I have a little bit of water going on here, but I think it's going to be okay. Okay. So since this area is dry, for the most part, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do another line along the edge of these bottom, along the bottom here. So I'm using a small brush and I'm going to try to kind of follow the contour of the wing here. And it's going to go all the way up to the top side there. I'm going to do it on the other side. Okay. And we also have these dark marks here along this line. So I'm gonna separate them a little bit and just kind of scatter them around here. So you can see I'm just gonna dab with my brush. And this is a great exercise if you just want to paint something. You can go on Unsplash or look through some images you might have of butterflies. And just paint them at your leisure. Okay, so that's pretty good for now. We can still, still have our upper wings to work on, and we still could darken this area a little bit more too. Now you can see my color is just a hair different than I did for this one. I did several layers of paint to get darker and darker, and I think I used a little more of the indigo. But I think I'm ready to move into this area to kind of give it a little more color. And so from the outside here, I'm going to move in. And along this edge, I'm going to try not to touch that edge in case there's anything wet there. Kind of failed on that side, but that's okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to soften this edge a little bit. So how I do that is I dip my brush in water and kind of tap it a little bit on my paper towel, and then I just run it gently along the edge. If it's dried, it might be a little too late, but that looks like it's softening pretty nicely. So this one feels a little bit darker. I could probably add some pigment here. This is what I call the bead. So you've got a bead of water, and wherever you take it, you know there's going to be a dark spot wherever it's left. So if I leave it in this corner, that pigment will settle there and create a darker area. So when I'm talking about moving the bead, that's what I'm referring to. I'm going to soften this edge just a little bit more. Okay. So we can do similar scalloping like we did down here along the top edge. And for me, this area is dry. I've had some, of course I have some moisture here, so I'm just gonna avoid that area. And I'm gonna dip in, and I'm going to, I knocked over my little paint, but I'm gonna dip into my Indigold, or if you have an indigo color or a little bit darker color, you see how dark that is. I'm going to run this along the upper edge of my wings. And if I can here, I'm going to run it in here to the body a little bit. So it kind of gives it a little definition there. And this pigment, it has just a little bit of water, so it is darker and it should dry a little faster. And what I love about this particular color is it has this gold in it, and it's really subtle. It's really nice. And if you want to, you could actually carry this all the way along the top curve of these wings. Okay, so we're going to go in for our second line of scallop. So you can see over here I've got the second line here. You can just connect it on the top here. Follow this line a little bit and do it over on the other side. My paint's drying a little bit. I'm just going to tap in a little bit of water. And there you go. So on this guy over here, he also has kind of these dark nubs here. So I'm going to add a little bit water to my pigment here, and I'm going to add those in where it kind of curves out. Hey Gutman, how are ya? Okay. So it's sort of starting to look like a butterfly. What do you think? Okay. I think we could even do a little bit darker wash in here. What do you think? This one, of course, is quite a bit darker, but I think we should go for it. So I'm going to take a little bit of my indigo and mix it with my greeny blue color and just do another little layer here. You could even scallop the edge a little bit there. You do the same on the other side. So it doesn't quite extend out to this lighter area. Thanks, Colin. It is starting to look like a butterfly. Thank you. Are you painting along with me tonight? So it's kind of fun. I really love to layer watercolor because it truly gives it a little more dimension and gives you a little more control. So I'm also going to do a little bit of this down below too, since we're hanging out and all. Oops, let's see. Just watching tonight. I need to get you some paint over there. It's a great time to go to the zoo or somewhere and go painting. Okay, so I'm looking at 50 minutes here. So I'm going to start doing some of the other embellishments to our butterfly. So we have in this image, we have these little dots along the edge of the wing. So we're going to add those, and I'm going to use this darker indigold color. Use what you have. And I'm just going to add these. And they don't have to be the same size. They're all kind of like a little oval. So Gutman, you didn't choose that moniker? How did you get that moniker then? Okay, so that's good. I'm going to leave this here and let that dry, and then I'm going to go into this bottom portion here. You can see there's a circle within a circle. So we're going to do a half circle here down below. And I'm going to actually kind of fix this one side. It looks like my paint blended a little too much. So I'm just gonna kind of define this a little bit better. Okay, so let's see where, it's always good to look to see where you have wet paint. And I have some wet paint in here. So I want to add some of these lines here within the butterfly wings. So I'm going to use a skinny little brush. If you don't have one, don't worry. Use what you have. I kind of really love these tiny brushes because they add that extra spice for detail, I guess. So you can see this is, I don't even know what it is. It's 10/0. It's so tiny. This is a golden taklon brush, but you can see how tiny that is, right? And I'm going to dip it in my dark color, my Indigold. I'm going to kind of use this as a guide a little bit and just run these little tiny lines to the body. Just kind of gives it that little bit of the icing on the cake, sort of. And you can have these little lines go off. Whoops. more prominent lines. Now, if you guys have questions regarding watercolor or watercolor supplies or anything like that, feel free to pop them down in the chat there. And maybe I can answer some for you. So I'm just going to move along these wings and just add these little embellishments. And in some spots, then I'll go back later and just add a little kind of gold highlight. I guess they should be symmetrical, but this butterfly is a rebel. So I really am a believer that art supplies really do make a difference. So when you are starting out, you start out with the basics. And when I started out with synthetic brushes that were, I think, Winsor & Newton brushes. They're red and they're synthetic and they're round, much like the shape of brush. And these brushes are great because they hold a lot of water. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move up here, but I'm going to avoid my wet blobs. But as you get used to handling the medium and become a more experienced painter, sometimes it pays to reevaluate your supplies in that maybe you need a better paper. You're ready for nicer paper or some nice brushes. Sometimes you just have to test them out to find out what you like. And experience is just how you find those things out. But I think if you're having trouble with watercolor and you're really not enjoying it, a lot of times it can be, there's a learning curve, and watercolor is difficult in a lot of ways. But sometimes a paper change might make you feel better about what's happening with your paintings, or maybe you need a better, more high quality paint. Don't be afraid to experiment. Okay, I'm gonna go back over to this side and try to mimic what I did over here. So for those of you who are tuning in, do you have any requests for next week's class? I would love to hear it if you have any. And I do want to do a class that is about the color wheel and how colors mix together. That's always beneficial and will definitely help those who struggle with mixing colors. And because I have such a great little brush, I can then put in her antenna here. Okay, so what more do we need to do? So one thing that I did on this painting that I really enjoyed was using a pop of color. And oh, Colin, you're interested in doing the color wheel next week? We can definitely do that and just kind of go over some basics, and it can be more about that. So I think that's a good way to go. Let's do her. So if you're tuning in next week, we're going to work a little bit with color. Okay, so this, I do want to show you this. I am going to do a review of these paints, you guys, but see, she uses wax paper for her little containers instead of plastic for these paints, which is pretty genius, and it also smells really good too, so that's cool. So I've got this red color, and I'm just gonna do the other half circle here with this red. Just a tiny pop of color. And then lastly, I think I'm going to do a little bit of embellishments with my gold color. And if you don't have a gold color, you can hang out and see how this looks, or you can use a colored pencil as well. I'm going to use a little bit bigger brush here and mix in a little bit of gold. So I just kind of highlighted spots on the butterfly just for fun. These would make a great card, and I thought about using these guys for thank you cards. Just a thank you card with a little bit of a personal touch. Let's see if I can bring this up to the camera. Can you see that gold? There we go, maybe you can there. Just kind of fun. And then I think it looks like I have gold in there down here in these little circles, but I can go around, just add a little bit of gold here. And then I added gold around those guys. Those little blobs of dark color. How would you mix indigo if you didn't have it? You know, indigo is a pigment color. So if you don't have an indigo color, I'd probably mix maybe a phthalo with a Payne's gray that would make it that dark color. It's not exactly the same. Payne's gray is also a great color. That's just a dark kind of grayish blue color. So that might be a good way to start. I have a color that is made out of sodalite. That's called sodalite. That is a dark color like this, or Payne's gray color. hopefully that answered your question all right. Okay, now I'm gonna add just some gold embellishments, you know. And what I kind of did with the other one was I did a little plus symbol and then kind of did a little swoop, so it's kind of like a retro, has a little bit of a retro feel, kind of in various spots, just for fun, because why not? If you're going to be using a gold color, you really should be having fun with it. This kind of adds a little bit to the whimsy, I think, of this little painting. You can vary their size there if you want. And there you go. There you have a little butterfly with some embellishments. Fun little exercise. What other questions do you guys have for me? I'm sure you've got more. Let's see. So I will hang out here for a minute maybe and see if we have any additional questions from you guys. Let me know if you enjoyed this tutorial. Definitely we'll look at color next week and maybe do some color wheel and talk about secondary colors and that sort of thing. So look forward to that. While we're hanging out, I'd like to thank Colin Jackson. He's my Patreon patron and helps make it possible for me to do these videos for you. So thank you, Colin. I appreciate that. And thank you guys for hanging out and spending time with me and doing a little painting today. And I hear my cat outside. She's meowing. They just don't understand that Mom's working here. They want to be in here with me. Well, if you do have questions, go ahead and pop them down in the comments. I'll be answering them into this evening. And so I'm happy to answer those questions that you might have. And if you're looking for some more watercolor tutorials, go ahead and check out some of the playlists that I have. I have a watercolor tutorial playlist where you can find quick, easy projects to just do a little painting. And of course, I have a ton of these live videos that you can check out too if you have about an hour. So thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you guys being here, and I look forward to seeing you next time, same place. So keep painting, and I'll see you then. Maybe.